want to welcome everyone to our first webinar of many webinars over the next couple months as we enter into a new world of social distancing. The economy, county, and the home building industry, what to expect for the remainder of 2020, presented by Cox, Castle, Nicholson. Thank you for your sponsorship. My name is Steve LaMotte. I'm the CEO for the Building Industry Association of Orange County. And before we start, I do want to thank all the attendees on the webinar today. I'm sure most of you know the BI is made up of 3 pillars: advocacy, networking, and education. And of course, the way to conduct most of those activities is through events and large crowds. So we're in a new realm here and continue to do business remotely, but that's going to depend greatly on our members for you to continue to remain engaged. So I thank you. And on top of that, our advocacy has also moved remotely. Over the last couple of weeks, the BIA chapters have been working very closely with local jurisdictions and partner agencies to encourage them to remain open and continue to build as the state and local counties have listed construction as an essential service. And so we have been tracking on our website current city precaution measures when it comes to development, planning, building, and have also begun to add what cities are doing for their upcoming public hearing that they have scheduled over the next couple months. So you can check that out at biaoc.com. And again, your membership, your engagement, it's imperative so that the BIA can continue to fight as we move into these uncharted territories. You can also continue to do your part by signing up on our website with your email, and you will be able to email local electeds, encouraging them to stay open again during these times. And so that is at biaoc.com. And so with that, I'm going to jump right in and start introducing our panel. I'm going to introduce them separately as they begin their portions. And so this is going to be pretty straightforward, as we would like the panelists to spend about 10 minutes or so on their sectors and what they have been experiencing over the last month, of course, and then what do they see for the remainder of 2020. Also, what are we not hearing from the media? Let's definitely try to keep this conversation positive. But we will be taking questions at the end, so you should start sending over your questions now. There should be a button down at the bottom of your screen for Q&A. You can start sending those immediately, and then we'll do our best to get through as many as possible within the hour. And so with that, I'm going to start with our first speaker, Supervisor Don Wagner. Don, I have a long bio, but I'm going to make it very brief. And of course, you guys can check out the full bio on our website. Elected in 2019 to the Board of Supervisors, Don works hard to bring accountability and transparency to county government, focusing his efforts on improving our quality of life. Don has a distinguished career of public service and accomplishments on behalf of the people he is privileged to represent. First elected to the South Orange County Community College District's Board of Trustees, Don went on to serve in the California State Assembly and then as mayor of Irvine. Don and his wife live in Irvine, where they have raised their 3 children. He has received his bachelor's degree from UCLA and his JD from UC College Hastings of Law. So Don, that is your very brief bio, and I'm going to kick it over to you with what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you to everybody who's participating in the webinar today. I am here to give you the latest from the county. We did just about 10 minutes ago finish a board meeting. We're meeting on a now weekly basis. Actually, we've been meeting more than weekly, but we're officially meeting weekly to get updates and provide direction to the county departments, county staff, and those that interact with us, the cities, especially some of the special districts, in terms of our response to the COVID-19 problem. A couple of things to tell you out of that meeting, and just in general. The first is that the original order passed by the Orange County Department of Health expired today. We're not through this, and it has been extended to be coterminous with the state's order, which is frankly much more restrictive than what we were originally doing here in Orange County. But it is now the order out of the state that is the operative order. I understand the feds are now saying their restrictions are going to stay in place through at least April 30th. What we heard today from the medical professionals was that we are expecting over the course of about the next 3 weeks and perhaps even into early May for our cases to continue to ramp up to us face the surge that perhaps we've seen in some other places. So Orange County has, unfortunately, a ways to go yet. We are continuing to encourage everyone to practice the social distancing that's been talked about, to stay at home to the extent possible, to not interact with each other to the extent possible, and expect those encouragements and restrictions to stay in place for the next several weeks. The good news is that we are seeing a lot of compliance. We are seeing our sheriff's department respond to us and say they've been able to practice a very light hand in terms of enforcing the social distancing requirements, that folks are in fact turning to each other to help each other in these circumstances. They are accessing the hotlines that have been set up, for example, to provide for themselves the kinds of relief and services that they need. And we're also seeing an enormous number of volunteers flooding our hotlines. How can I help? They're asking us. If I have access, and I've fielded a number of these calls myself, access to masks, to gloves, to other personal protective equipment, how do I get them in the hands of the first responders, the healthcare professionals who need them? So the community is very much stepping up, and that is very good news and something that I want to encourage. I will give you all in a little bit a couple of hotlines that you can use for yourselves, for your friends, family, loved ones, not just to access services, but to provide them yourselves to the extent you can. A couple of numbers. The most recent number as of about 2 o'clock yesterday, and it's the most recent number I have, we have 464 cases in Orange County. That number will go up, and that is only of the tested positive cases. So far, 4 deaths have been reported, and there is a protocol that the CDC has put in place that is relevant to these numbers. And that protocol is to determine who has recovered. All 464 of those cases, and I expect when the number comes out in a couple of hours, for the last 24 hours, it to go up even more. But one thing I want folks to know is that's everybody in the course of this disease in Orange County who've tested positive from our very first patient back in February, who has recovered and is home now, to the most recent tests. The CDC says you are considered recovered if you have been symptom-free for 3 days, and it's been at least 7 days since the onset of symptoms. The tests we're doing aren't being, for lack of a better word, wasted on folks who are recovering to make sure that we cleared them. The tests are being used on the people who are coming down with the disease, and we need to know on a going forward basis. So the 464 is a cumulative count. Many of those, I don't know how many people, have in fact recovered. With respect to our hospitals and their services and the availability of those services, there are 25 here in Orange County. All of them and their emergency departments are operational. We have 5,367 available beds. The hospital beds to date are filled at a 63% capacity, and that is not all COVID. That is their hospital operations. And they tell us that that is normal for this year. It is, however, the PPEs, the personal protective equipment, for which supplies are running low. And stay tuned, I'll give you a hotline if you have a line on PPEs, if you want to help us fill that need. Our Emergency Operations Center is taking calls. The number is 714-628-7085. 714-628-7085. I've heard from a lot of labs. I've heard from a lot of private industry saying that they may be able to get us the units that we would need. We have gone through, I have a number here, over 1.1 million units of medical supplies, including masks and gloves. And we are in the market for more than 1 million additional units. We have a line on where we're going to get them, but we can still use the help. All of that is a long way of saying that the county's Emergency Operations Center is acting as our clearinghouse and that it is fully operational. Contact my office, contact them. We can get you into the necessary folks to help us meet these needs. And in fact, that work is ongoing. In addition, the Orange County Rescue Mission is up and operating. They're needing diapers, adult and infant. They're needing wipes, adult and infant. They're needing nutritional shakes. They're needing infant formula. Contact the Orange County Rescue Mission if you have the ability to help them with their goal of providing that sort of information. And finally, or those sort of supplies. And then finally, I want to give you a little bit of information. There is a website that our Emergency Operations Center is using, again, for donations. That is EOC Logistics, all one word, EOC Logistics at OCSD.org. If you can help, if you know somebody who can help, that's where you would go. Last but not least, and of interest to the business community, fairly recently, the Orange County Business Council came up with a helpline, a website that provides information to the business community, and the Economic and Business Recovery Call Center is being operated by the county. That number is 714-480-6500. All of those resources are available. They are fully mobilized. I thank BIA and everybody who's participating in this call for the willingness that you're demonstrating to step up. And I'm going to tell you, keep doing it. We're going to need it for several more weeks. And I'll take questions if anybody has them.
Perfect. Let me get off mute here. Perfect. I appreciate that, Supervisor. Thank you. I think we will look to do some questions at the end here. So I am actually going to kick it over to Eric Nelson, and I got a quick little bio here. Eric Nelson is responsible, he's the Vice President of Land Development at Trumark Homes, but Eric is responsible for overseeing the land development process at Trumark Homes, including entitlements, budgets, schedules, and project management of residential communities with a long-term goal of attaining city approvals. Eric's background is in due diligence, land planning, and the entitlement process that spans nearly 2 decades. He has secured approval for thousands of residential units and millions of square feet of commercial and mixed-use space. In addition to his day job, he's also a Dana Point Planning Commissioner and Vice Chair of BIA Orange County, and so to an extent, somewhat my boss, one of my bosses here. So give him a big round of applause. I know I won't be able to hear him, but I know that you'll be, of course, doing that at home. So Eric, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Great. Hey, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And I'm really honored to have this opportunity to share with all of you some highlights from the industry and some of the news that we're hearing. But I think I want to first acknowledge the loss of life associated with this virus. And while it's tragic, the truth is that there's some good that's coming out of this, or that will come out of this. As this virus spreads, obviously the fear spreads. And I'm sure sitting at home, at least for me, and in some cases, others who are alone or home with restless family members, are really trying to make sense of a tough time. And the things I'm seeing, frankly, is this really interesting, growing understanding of the importance of the collective and the community. And this webinar, for one, is great because we're hearing real-time information. And I know for me that real-time information is critical to working through this. Over the past few weeks, I've talked with over 40 industry leaders across the United States. And what I'm hearing is a level of solidarity, humanity, and hope with very little hysteria, which for me is good news. I don't do well with hysteria, and our leaders are remaining calm, and I think that's critical to making it through this. I was thinking back last night to a little bit about what I was going to share today, and I was thinking about the last crisis, the housing crisis of '08 and the Great Recession, and trying to do sort of a contrast and compare. And what I remember back then is that projects were shutting down, that we were walking away from projects, literally leaving deposits, losing our funding. Many communities were half built, and you were seeing builders literally just leave them. And today it's so much different. And so I want to, I know we're going to have a doctor speak to the economics of what we're dealing with, but it's so different. Even though it may feel the same, we're begging cities to allow us to keep moving forward. Literally, I know Steve, Adam, and the BIA team has done a tremendous amount of work to make sure that we can actually keep the businesses moving forward. That was not the case in '08. And I think when you look at it in just that frame, it makes this, for me, not as scary. And it's different. It's fundamentally different. So a few highlights, I think, and I'll make this brief. The builders are still making deliveries, and there are very few cancellations. We had our board meeting yesterday, and that was sort of the message, is that everybody's still moving forward, relatively normal, given the situation. My company, Trumark, we made 10 deliveries in the last 2 weeks, which I wouldn't call those record deliveries, but we've delivered every home that was on our pipeline, and we've taken some reservations. Most builders are expecting a bad Q2, but they do expect that to pick up in the third and fourth quarter. There's an expectation that prices will likely remain flat or maybe even decline a little bit, with a need to increase incentives. But most interestingly enough, even for us, is that warranty service is getting more difficult and becoming more and more of an issue. Trying to send people out to deal with warranty issues. And with homeowners now sitting in their home that's now turned into their office, they're finding those little issues that become warranty issues. So, it's interesting how this whole coronavirus is impacting different segments of our business. For instance, we're seeing some issues with supply procurement with flooring and some appliances. But optimism is still high. And I think that's, again, there was no optimism in '08. I think you were, at least I wasn't very optimistic. And I know most of us were dealing with some pretty dramatic things. We were laying off a lot of people, and a lot of us were laid off as well. So of all the people that I've spoken to over the past since last week, 9% of them have indicated a complete shutdown. And those are only in the secondary markets. So if you're in a good market, the expectation is that things will continue to move forward. On that note, traffic is obviously down because people can't visit our model sites, or at least we're not allowing that. And it's too soon to tell how the online traffic is going to adjust. But what we do know is that the online traffic and the virtual sales process are delivering buyers. We did make a couple reservations last week, and what we're finding is that if they're in the market and they are showing up, they're real, and they're not just spending time taking a look at your models. And then lastly, most builders are moving forward with new projects. I'm busier today than I've ever been, and my projects take a lot longer because we do a lot of land development and a lot of entitlements. But most builders are either moving forward or slightly delaying. I have not heard of one that's terminated an existing transaction. And in most cases, sellers are being realistic with what we're all dealing with. Lastly, technology is really coming in handy. The internet's allowing for us to do things like this webinar. It's allowing our sales team to continue to do virtual sales. We've delivered homes now with technology. And in many cities, we're doing our inspections virtual. It's also allowing for new and unique ways to do outreach. And so if you're in the outreach business, having the ability to mute your opposition is a new and potentially game-changing way of doing things. So we'll see sort of how that changes things. But technology has become extremely valuable. So hopefully everybody's got a good internet connection at home. I know that at a state level, there's been some discussion about extending existing maps, permits, and regulatory requirements, but nothing specific has come out of Sacramento yet. So hopefully in the next week or two, we'll start to see some of that. With regards to CEQA, traffic analysis and EIRs, but we are doing virtual scoping meetings now. We have 2 scheduled for next week. So those will be interesting to see how those play out. And, lastly, we're all learning new things. And I'll speak for myself. I started making bread, because who knows if you can get bread anymore. And I cut my own hair the other day, and it seems to have worked out pretty good. So, there is a silver lining here. I want to take, this last minute to thank all of our members for being on this call today, for the team over at OCBIA, Steve, Adam, and everybody else for your help. Laura, Shelby, there's a whole list of them. It's critical to have this information and these opportunities, and for you guys, continuing to fight on behalf of this industry, and of course the sponsors for making this all happen. So with that, stay safe, everybody, and thank you again for allowing me to be part of this.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say someone did send in a note here, and they said your haircut looks great. So good job on that. But really quickly, one thing we talked about on our board call the other day was what builders are doing on site to be in compliance with the social distancing practices. And we'll have some questions for you, obviously, at the end. But I don't know if you want to talk about this for a second, because we've been hearing, regulators in Texas showed up to job sites to verify that the construction teams are practicing social distancing. While it's possible, it's got to be somewhat difficult at all times. But building is considered right now an essential service, so it is allowed to process and allowed to go forward. But I'm curious if by chance you guys have done anything different or extra on the site to make sure that homes are continued to be built.
Yeah, sure. We are doing distancing on site to the extent that we can, and it's actually not that hard. We're requiring hand washing. We've got sanitizer throughout the development in the areas where we have the guys working. So first and foremost, the most important thing for us is that our team, and that includes all of our subs and all of our trades, are safe. The last thing we want to do is make this worse by continuing to work out in the field. And so from the day we started moving forward with sheltering in place, so to speak, we started actually on the 10th as a company. I know that as an industry, we didn't start doing that, but we started early because the Bay Area, we have a Northern Cal office, and the Bay Area had shut down around that time. We decided that it was more important for the safety of our team members and the reality that this was coming south, that we start to prepare it early. So that preparation helped us quite a bit. And, we haven't had any inspections, OSHA inspections, but I expect that if we did, we would pass with flying colors.
Outstanding. Awesome. Great to hear. Okay, then we're going to move on to Dr. Thornberg really quickly here. Dr. Thornberg founded Beacon Economics in 2006. Under his leadership, the firm has become one of the most respected research organizations in California, serving public and private sector clients across the U.S. In 2015, Dr. Thornberg also became director of the UC Riverside School of Business, Center for Economic Forecasting and Development, and is an adjunct professor at the school. Dr. Thornberg holds a PhD in business economics from the Anderson School at UCLA. And so, okay, Doc, we're going to kick it over to you. I'm sure there's probably a couple hours of information to talk about, but this is the big question: the economy. What are? I mean, I'm here in my garage. I have the news on now, pretty much 24/7. I'd be scared.
Steve, first thing you gotta do is turn off the news. Just
turn off the news. You listen. You listen to the news all day long. You're scared to death to go outside. Even if this is eventually not going to, be a threat that lasts forever, I mean, what is it going to do to us mentally? But that being said, I'll kick it over to you. And, again,
Sure.
Would love to hear what's been going on. What do you forecast for the remainder of 2020?
Got it. No, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. And it's good to come on the end of the conversation here. I'll tell you, coming after Don and Eric really helps, right? Because in a lot of ways, I heard a lot of the things I wanted to hear, if you will. For Don, obviously, there's a lot of folks out there working hard to make sure we're ready for this. We can deal with it as place comes. But then from Eric, you said two things that I just absolutely couldn't agree more with. One, this is not 2008. It is nothing like 2008, and we need to put that away. And the second thing you said is, I don't like hysterics. Well, let's go back to the comment about Steve not watching the news, because right now, all you are hearing, all you are reading is some of the most incredible hysteria we've ever seen. Now, that's not to diminish what's going on right now. What's happening in California, what's happening in the nation, and what's happening globally, this is unprecedented, right? We've never had to deal with something like this before. We've put in place some of the most really draconian limits on people's ability to interact with each other to try and get in front of this virus. And while that's all scary and clearly the largest negative shock to hit our economy in 10 years, nevertheless, this is completely, totally different than what happened during the Great Recession. And as such, those who continue to claim that this is going to be as bad, if not worse than the Great Recession, well, candidly, they don't know what they're talking about. Look, go back to the Great Recession just for a second. Let's understand, the Great Recession was created because of what happened in the preceding 4 years. Remember, from 2003 to 2007, Wall Street managed to figure out a way of just opening up the spigots, and trillions of dollars of subprime credit flowed into American households in a way we've never seen before. Now, what that did was it caused certain parts of our economy, housing being a primary one, but not the only one, to become highly overheated. Highly overheated in terms of the pace of buying and selling, the pace of borrowing, the growth in prices, and also the vast overproduction of homes in the U.S. economy. When everything started to unwind in 2007, the U.S. economy was completely out of whack. And what happened, of course, in the midst of the beginning of the Great Recession is those jobs that were related to that bubble. Think of the millions of jobs in construction, in real estate, in finance. All those jobs started disappearing because they shouldn't have been there in the first place. So we lost millions of jobs that didn't come back. And as a result of that, the U.S. economy went through years of painful rebuilding as those people who lost those jobs had to find new jobs, new careers, new income streams in other parts of the economy. It was an enormous long-run blow to the U.S. in ways that we're, in some ways, still grappling with. Now, come to today. This virus has hit the U.S. economy, and we have had to shut things down. All sorts of places, stay in place moves, policies across the nation, telling businesses that they just can't open. Workers have to work from home, so on and so forth. These are public health mandates that are designed to help us keep control of the spread of this virus. And I'll tell you, they seem to be working. Here in California, for example, we've seen really good signs that we seem to be in front of things. We still have a few scary weeks in front of us, but it seems to me that we do see a path forward. Whether this takes us to the middle of May, the end of May, no one quite knows yet, but we seem like we're in front of it. Now, what is this doing to the economy? It's creating some serious short-run disruptions. There's no doubt about it. Last week's initial claims for unemployment was an incredibly scary number. Over 3 million claims in 1 week. We've never seen anything like that, 4 to 5 times higher than we've ever seen. If you think about what's going to happen in terms of Q2, it's easy to imagine a -5, -6, maybe a -10% growth rate for Q2. These are scary numbers. But these jobs, for example, they aren't lost. They're furloughed. The business that is being not allowed to happen right now, it will happen. People are still going to go to Disneyland. People are going to go out and buy those clothes. They're going to take that trip that they were going to take. They just can't do it right now. So as opposed to seeing millions of jobs lost for good and people being displaced for a long period of time, what you're dealing with here is a very sharp, very large, but also fairly short shock to the system. There is no fundamental imbalances. We're not an economy out of control. If you go through a list of numbers, it's easy to see that right now, in fact, prior to this virus hitting, the US was fundamentally as strong as it's been in 30 years. Savings rates for consumers above 8%, debt to income ratios, the financial obligations ratio. This was a US economy that was very, very fundamentally solid. Now, does this mean there's going to be no long-run harm? There's going to be long-run harm. Of course there is. You've turned off income flows for millions of at-risk households. You've turned off revenues for thousands and thousands of at-risk businesses. If those businesses start to fail, if those households start to go into bankruptcy, we could create long-run problems. That's the point of government policy. You know, when you think about what we need to do right now, it's just a matter of helping those at-risk households, those at-risk businesses bridge the gap, make these 3 months, make it through these 3 months. Once we do, we know on the other side, there's going to be an enormous amount of pent-up demand. There's going to be an enormous bounce back in overall consumer spending, and the economy is going to come roaring back as well. With a $2 trillion plan at the federal level, with plenty of state initiatives being put into place, and in fact, even private enterprises getting involved. If you saw, the Irvine company released a statement saying they're going to give all their retail tenants 3 months in order to not have to pay their rent. They'll have to pay it eventually, but they're giving them a 3-month break right now. This is exactly what we need to see. We're moving to all the right places. Now let's bring it home to housing, because that's what we're here to talk about. Where is housing now compared to then? Well, look, in 2006, this nation built 2.1 million housing units, vastly more than we needed. Housing vacancies were at a record high level as a share of the housing stock. You had an incredible amount of housing debt out there. Foreclosures were already on the rise before we saw any major economic downturn in the economy. In other words, housing was a mess. Today, it's the exact opposite. Today, housing is about as bulletproof as it could be. Look, we have very low debt levels in the housing market. Equity is a share of overall housing value in the US, record high percent. You've seen very little growth in mortgage debt. In fact, mortgage debt's been growing slower than home price appreciation for 8 years now, leaving us with a record high level of equity. And of course, that debt that there is very, very clean with record low delinquency rates. This is not a housing market that is subject to some sort of free fall type collapse. Yes, it's going to stall a little bit over the course of the next couple of months. After all, people aren't allowed to look at homes. And candidly, a lot of people aren't thinking about buying a home when they're sheltering at home. It's not what's in their mind. But they're going to get there. We know that. And in the meantime, particularly in Southern California, including Orange County and LA, remember, the biggest problem we have is a shortage of housing. So, you know what? Builders continue to build. There's going to be lots of demand on the backside of this, even if those buyers right now don't happen to be showing up at your sites. Look, the fundamentals are there. What we need is good, strong public policy. I want to congratulate the governor, the mayors, the supervisors in this state who've taken dramatic actions to get control over the virus. The more dramatic, the tougher we are right now, the quicker we get control and the quicker we can turn the economy on again. And the quicker we turn the economy on again, the faster people are going to be to go out and buy that new home. And we're going to get back up and running again. Now, there's still a lot of uncertainty. We all know that. There's a lot of weeks, a lot of painful time between now and when this thing finally goes away. But if we all do the right things, if we stay tough and work through this and get control of this virus, a very, very nasty Q2. But don't let the optics of those statistics get into your head. These are short run by nature, not long run. This is not a mass reorganization of the economy. It's a temporary slowing of the economy while we deal with the public health crisis. As long as we do the right things, that big negative second quarter is going to be offset by a very large positive third and fourth quarter. And we expect by the end of the year, we're going to be basically back to where we were at the start of the year before the virus really started causing problems in the global economy. So ultimately, I am hopeful, and I'm hopeful because we're making the right moves. So stay strong, keep doing what you're doing, and remember, this too shall pass, and a lot quicker than the Great Recession did. Thank you very much, Steve.
Wow, thanks, Doc. I really appreciate that. Some good optimism. What I'm going to do actually right now is first, again, announce if you do have a question, use the Q&A button here at the bottom. We're going to do our best to ask as many as possible and try to get those answered. But first, Eric or the supervisor, do you guys have anything after hearing Dr. Thornberg's discussion that you guys would like to ask? I'd rather have the smart people ask the questions than myself. So.
Well, I'm not sure this.
Go ahead, Supervisor, please.
Supervisor, go first.
All right, thank you. This is not really a question, but it is something that I wanted to emphasize because I heard it both from Eric and from Chris, and that's the idea of optimism. We are at this point testing the adage that very many people out there are living paycheck to paycheck, and we're testing it in a somewhat brutal way by shutting off those paychecks. But it is my sense, as you heard from Dr. Thornberg, I think he's absolutely correct. The fundamentals remain there. And what we are trying to do at the County of Orange, at least, is do what we need to do to stem the tide of the disease, provide the resources that are available to us in the community to stem the disease, to help the most vulnerable, to deal with the homeless population, to, as the doctors say, first do no harm and realize it's going to be tight, it's going to be tough for a few more weeks, maybe a month and a half. But at the end of the day, the good doctor is absolutely right that the fundamentals remain there, and we are going to come through this hopefully more cohesive as a community because everybody is pulling together. And finally, to pick up on one thing that Eric said about the increased use of technology, this webinar being one example, we're seeing not just more technology coming online, but we are seeing the governor and others streamlining processes, making some changes to the way we do business. And I'd solicit the community out there that's watching this to help us identify some of those changes that can be not just for dealing with this COVID crisis, but something that long-term would make government more efficient, make it more business-friendly, and maybe make us show us a way to do good things that will serve us in the long run. Quick example, the feds are being asked to put more money into broadband because so many people are in our communities unable to access quickly the internet, unable to get their children educated since the schools are shut down to the extent they would like. Put more money into broadband. That'll help us now. That'll help us long term. Let's find other examples like that to make something good out of this crisis.
Eric, any comments on Dr. Thornberg's discussion? And you're on mute, by the way. Eric, you're on mute still, by the way. There you go.
Any comments? It was great to hear your optimism. I am curious, how do you see the stimulus package ripple through, in the coming weeks as those checks start to arrive?
Right. There's a couple of things in the stimulus, and I tell you, a couple of things about the stimulus thing. First of all, wow, $2 trillion that they pulled together in a few weeks. You got to remember when the Great Recession hit, we were arguing whether we were even in a recession for the first 8 months of it. And then even after that, it took them 3 months to get a stimulus package passed. So we actually didn't see any stimulus till the beginning of 2009. This time around, in weeks, they got it off the ground and got it running. Now, not every part of that stimulus plan I think is terribly good. For example, sending every single American a $1,200 check, is a little silly. Now, I know that sounds weird. It sounds like a great idea, but let's keep in mind, the problem today is that people aren't being allowed to spend money. Giving people money to spend when they're not allowed to spend money seems a little pointless. But putting that to one side, some folks are going to be helped by that money, and a lot of folks are going to be helped by the expansion of unemployment insurance, not to mention some of the social support like food stamp expansions. So that's very good news. Households that really do need the support, particularly those who've been put into this short-run unemployment situation, are going to get a bigger unemployment insurance check. That's going to help quite a bit. And another big thing, of course, has to do a lot with the lending windows. Look, certain industries, such as the airline industry, are going to get a very large check, but there's also a very large pool of money. The federal government has taken $500 billion, put it into a fund. The Federal Reserve is going to leverage that up with $4 trillion of their own money, and they're going to create an enormous lending window, which they can turn around and spend to, again, help businesses if there's any kind of short-run disruptions to their ability to borrow money. Yet again, helping businesses get from here to there. There are some specific provisions for small businesses as well that look relatively helpful. Lots of good news there. The only question now is how fast can you get this rolled out? That's the big thing. And, you know, if it's a few weeks, we'll be okay. It is too easy to imagine that every single business and every single household is living dollar by dollar, but they're not. There is a tremendous amount of cash in the system. There's no doubt that certain businesses that were already having trouble or could be pushed right over the edge. But most businesses out there and most households have enough money tucked away to get them through a few weeks. And even if they can't, remember, the financial system takes a little while as well. You got to be delinquent 3-4 months on your mortgage before the bank actually starts thinking about pushing the foreclosure button on you. So there is space here, and we're going to be using it. And I think ultimately it's going to be helpful. So that will go some direction. Of course, again, the state is already putting some policies in place. For example, Newsom just announced that businesses would not be required to pay their taxes. They'd be given, not permanently, but temporarily, they're going to be given some space. Again, you can keep your reserves up. You could spend your money not on getting that check sent to Sacramento, but doing the short run things you need to do to make sure you're ready for when it is time to turn the business on again. All good news.
Wow, I definitely appreciate the optimism. So we have multiple questions coming across right now, and actually a lot of really good questions I'm going to try to ask here. But Don, I think the first one's going to go to you, and something we might have talked about a little while back, but similar to as we're talking about businesses coping with this problem right now, I mean, we haven't really talked about government, local government, jurisdictions here locally. If I'm not mistaken, going into this, cities were already seeing sort of stagnant revenue based on sales tax moving online. Now we're literally having retail sales completely stopped for some time here. What is that going to do for our local cities? How are they going to cope with this? And then again, in terms of the county, property taxes. Are we going to see a lot of delinquencies? I know that there's been recent discussion on allowing people to pause and not pay for a little while, but I think that's kind of always the case if you can show reason. But curious how you see local jurisdictions adapting to this issue right now.
I wish I had a good answer for you, Steve. That is one of the things that does keep me up at night, is the ripple effect, because so many of our local governments do depend on things like property taxes to come in at the robust level they do. This county, as you know, has always been a donor county, but we are much more of a donor county than some of our surrounding neighbors. San Diego, I understand, gets nearly twice the return on tax dollars it ships off to Sacramento than we do. Los Angeles even more so. So we've been uniquely stressed, and I don't sadly see that changing in any particular significant way. It will end up rippling through the economies of some of our municipalities. Bottom line is that property taxes are due April 10. There's a lot of pressure to relieve that date. I don't foresee that relief coming. First of all, it has to come from the state legislature because those deadlines are in state law, and our local tax treasurers, tax collectors and treasurers, local boards of supervisors do not have the statutory authority to fix it. The deadline is April 10, and I understand the legislature's out of session until well past that deadline. So I honestly don't expect that relief coming. But the thing to note is the date's always been there, and folks have known that it's been coming for some time. Like Dr. Thornberg says, it is our hope, it's our expectation that the folks have been saving up, that they do have the cushion, that some of that money will roll in. 100 cents on the dollar from what we expect? Absolutely not. Will we be able to waive penalties and interests? That's actively under discussion. I do see, and personally would support, relief along those lines. But you do need to know that this is going to have a long-term ripple effect throughout the local governments. And right now we're able to fund our sheriff's department, our public safety. We're able to fund Orange County Fire Authority. They're up and operational at complete capacity. But if we don't get that tax revenue in, our abilities to make the school districts whole is substantially challenged. So that is, as I say, one of the things that does keep me up at night. We're all in it. We're all pitching in together. Our cities have got their emergency operations centers working. They are in line to get some of the help that is out there. Collectively, I think we get through it, but at the municipal level, not without some further pain.
No, totally understand. Thank you. I appreciate that. I got a couple for Dr. Thornberg here, a couple that have come over in terms of the discussion on inflation, obviously. I'm going to read this one, but once the virus passes, how does $2 to $6 trillion of leveraged stimulus work its way through the economy? And are we looking at a period of massive inflation over the course of the next couple years? And then to add on top of that, I just had, this is a short-term issue at the moment, as we've all been discussing, of course, but is there a time where it becomes a long-term problem? I mean, if you guys have been looking at however long this lasts will equal that much longer of a recovery, I'm curious if that's part of the data. So 2 questions.
Right. No, those are both really great questions. Let me start with the second one. Obviously, if the virus gets out of control and it stays in the system for 6 months, 9 months, the longer this lockdown continues, obviously, the more dramatic impact it's going to have on the long run health of the U.S. economy, because we will see kind of those more long run changes, more and more businesses closing permanently, and that's going to be painful to see. In a very real sense, it's short-term pain equals long-run gain. The more dramatic we are in terms of shutting things down and getting in front of the virus right now, and I understand the short-run costs for households, for local government, as Don was saying, I get it. But more pain there is right now, the quicker we get this under control. The quicker we get this under control, the faster we bounce back up. That's the whole reason we're doing this right now. So, for those people out there who are chomping at the bit and are telling us the cure is worse than the disease, no, it is not. Go look what's happening in Italy. Go look what's happening in Spain. Understand the consequences of not doing enough. We're doing what we need to do, and please support these efforts, because this is how we get in charge of this. Now, the first question is a little different, and I'll tell you, you're right. I mean, what's amazing about this is you're talking about the federal government, at least right now, probably going to spend $1 trillion to $2 trillion. It's unclear how it's going to shake out because some of it's loans, which means they'll get money back. But you got to remember, we are already in process of borrowing $1 trillion this year at the federal level. So we're going to end up with a year $2 to $2.5 trillion of new federal debt. To put that in context, that's worse than the worst year under the Obama administration during the Great Recession. Our federal government has completely just foregone anything resembling fiscal long-run responsibility. And we will pay for this eventually, not right away. And it certainly isn't inflationary because it is true debt. But I tell you what, it's funny because there are some economists who are calling this pandemic a black swan event. And of course, that's a term for some unexpected thing that's hit. And I'm sure most of the people out there who are epidemiologists who've been warning about a potential for pandemic for the last decade are going crazy. We've been telling you this was going to happen. We've been telling you to be prepared. Now it's here and you're telling us it's a big surprise? Well, in 10 years, when we crash upon the shores of that fiscal debt crisis, it's going to be the same conversation. Some folks are going to call it a black swan, and economists are going to be saying, hey, for years, we've been saying we have to get in front of this. We have to deal with the federal debt situation. It's not an immediate crisis, but I tell you what, every year we do this, we're just pulling that crisis that much closer to today. And it is truly sad that 10 years into this expansion in one of the healthiest economies we've seen in 30 years, nevertheless, our federal government is still running a $1 trillion deficit. It says a lot, not only about the political regime in Washington, D.C., but also about Americans' ability to just turn a blind eye to something they don't want to think about. Well, you know what? Pandemics are now here, and it's part of our conventional wisdom, whether we like it or not. And I hope next time around we're a little smarter. But we also have to have this conversation about the national debt.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So, Eric, I'm going to kick one over to you. We have someone who has asked, what, if any, erosion are you seeing to the backlog? What steps are you taking to manage those risks? Also, are you seeing any impact in the mortgage lending space? And then on top of that, I want to go a little bit further and maybe say, take everything we've kind of talked about today, as a local policymaker, where do you see the housing market as a builder? Your educated opinion, where do you see the housing market, right after this recovers? Are the low rates, is the pent-up demand, and possibly cities really wanting development, maybe a little bit more than they want now? I think we just saw a city actually start to free up regulation during this time for the building industry in terms of the process, because they're actually trying to help development get through, something we've been asking for a while, but it took a pandemic to kind of get that going. So I'm curious what you might think the housing market is going to look like in your opinion after.
Sure. So yes, Steve, thanks. Good question. I think the first one about backlog, what we're doing so far, we've had, I think, one cancellation. Our sales team is doing a great job of reaching out to all of our existing buyers to ensure that things keep moving forward. The one cancellation that we did have at this point was funded. And so it wasn't a lending issue. It was, a family with a family member who came down with cancer, unfortunately. So it wasn't even related to this. But it's really been our team reaching out to our buyers, talking to them, making sure that they still feel comfortable. We have not seen any major changes in the lending at this point. That doesn't mean that won't change, but I think if you still have a job and have an income and have your down payment, lenders are still loaning money. They are still working, so that's been good. I think to your question about pent-up demand, we have pent-up demand. We have had that for quite some time, and I think Dr. Thornberg spoke to that a little bit earlier. But the industry fundamentals are good. I don't think anybody could argue that going into this, we had more housing than we needed. And just from the RENA perspective alone, we know that that's, a huge amount of planning effort that's going to have to go forward here quickly. And as an industry, we're in good shape. And they reshape things. They may have people looking at what they're going to buy and how they're going to buy it. And I don't think we've gotten into the psychology yet of people being at home for, a month at a time and how they're going to look at that space differently. So that stuff we're now talking about is how do we plan for the psychology of what is occurring today going forward.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So we are about to end here, but what I want to do is try to end on a positive note. First, I just want to thank our sponsor again, Cox, Castle, Nicholson, for the presenting sponsor for this event. I don't think there could be three industries or three sectors right now of the economy that we would want to hear from beyond the three of you. So I really appreciate it. But let's try to end on a positive note. I'm going to go to each one of you. We'll start with the supervisor first. But let's talk again. What's the silver lining? Put aside all the negativities, all the chaos, of course. What are we going to walk away from, in your opinion, better from this? And Don, let's start with you.
Let me again thank you. Thanks to Cox Castle, Nicholson, and the sponsors and everybody who participated. What are we going to walk away with? I'm certainly hoping it is more of a community spirit. It's no surprise. Politics has been very bitter, very divisive, but everybody is in this one together. As I see, we're seeing an uptick in volunteers. I understand that the blood banks are now, they're still looking for help, but we were trying to do one, get one scheduled at the Nixon Library in my district, and they're there this week, they're there later in April, and it's the last available day. I was able to find an appointment myself. So people are coming out to help. I urge folks to go to our website, the county website, www.OC Community Services, OC Community Services, that's all one word, .org, to volunteer. So the bottom line is we're getting this community coming together. I want to thank people for that. And I want to say to Eric's point, maybe about streamlining some of the processes, we can find examples of that and keep those in place over the next coming decade, not just until we get through COVID. Maybe we will have at least something positive to take out of this.
Yeah, totally agree. I appreciate that. Eric.
Yeah, so there you go. Closing thoughts. Well, again, thanks for everybody that attended this, taken, for a lot of us, our lunch hours, yeah, you're at home. Most of you at least, but for taking the time to participate in this, again, to our sponsors, to Dr. Thornberg and to Supervisor Wagner and Steve for being part of this. I'm, again, honored to be on here and really look forward to all of us being back outside of our homes and working together again in the very soon, not too distant future.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Thornberg, silver linings. What are we going to walk away?
Well, listen, I know this sounds like an odd silver lining, but let's be glad that this coronavirus, as serious as it is, isn't actually worse. If this had the same sort of mortality rate as a MERS or SARS or an Ebola, this would be a much uglier situation. The biggest issue we're dealing with here is the unknown. We've never had to go through this exercise, but they've been telling us it's a possibility. I think this one is a good practice run for us. Yes, it's tough for families that are losing loved ones right now, and I get that, but it could be a lot scarier. So let's walk away from this a little smarter. Let's walk away from this a little bit more prepared for the next round. And like Don said, maybe walk away from this a little bit better off to be able to deal with each other and work together collectively in some sort of common goal. So for me, let's take that away and again, hold strong as we get through the next few weeks.
Okay, with that, I think we are done here. Again, I want to thank Supervisor Don Wagner, Eric Nelson, Trumark Homes, Dr. Thornberg, Beacon Economics. Thank you guys for taking the time. Valuable information. And so with that, we will conclude. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.